Yeah, my name is André Bright. I am Sierra Leone born, but I live in London at the moment. And yeah, I just have a lot of interests, culture, creativity. I'm a dancer and architect, a socialpreneur. And I think through my journey, I've just had different things that have happened that have opened my eyes out to different experiences. So now I'm at a stage where I'm being drawn back to Sierra Leone and trying to put the skills that I've developed into something that will benefit my home place. So that's where we'll probably cover quite a bit of that. So in terms of the architecture and the business side of things. But yeah, that's where I am at the moment.
That's very interesting. Of course, we're going to spend some time there. I really love that. That is about giving back to our country where we are coming from. That is
Yeah.
that is that is lovely. Anyway, just before we get there, just that is something that we do here. We're sort of fanatic about that. In that we try to know who we are, where are we coming from. I know you already said a bit about that, but help me understand you. Were you born in Sierra Leone or you were born in the UK?
Yeah, I was born in Sierra Leone and we moved here. I might look younger than younger than I actually am. I was born in 1985 and we moved to UK when my mum was doing her PhD, and that was about 1990. So that was a year before the Civil War started, and that went on for about 10 years. And even though we were meant to be here just for a couple of years for that period of time, it ended up becoming a permanent solution. And I think that was, to be honest with you, if I was to be real, that was the beginning of my separation from the culture, because I started to be really ingrained into British culture and there weren't many Sierra Leoneans around. We moved into Reading at first, so there weren't even many Black people around at the time either. Apart from where I was living in a place called the Methodist Overseas Guest House. And just to give an idea of that, because those are two completely different worlds. At home, it was a place where international students would come and live with their families before they get permanent accommodation. And they would stay there for about 3, 6, 9 months. But we stayed there for 7 years. So my friendship group, my understanding of the world, it was literally like living in the planet. So anytime there was like World Cup or anything, everyone was celebrating their own. And I think that was where my curiosity with culture in general began. Um, but yeah, we stayed there for 7 years and then moved to Reading and then uni, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I've been here ever since. It's only since I think 2016 when we went back to Sierra Leone and I had an epiphany. I remember getting very frustrated that I couldn't I felt the distance between myself and my fellow brothers and sisters back home. And I don't know, it bothered me. I remember having a moment with my mum and I said to her, I don't understand why when we go to any other country, we would do all these exploring, we'll do all these activities, we'd go here, we go there. By day 3, we are able to maneuver by ourselves individually. But then whenever we go to Sierra Leone, which is the place I really want to connect to, we only go to my grandma's house, one of the beaches, and church. And I didn't even have the language at that point. So there were a lot of barriers for me. So I think that was the beginning of what I'm experiencing now, which is that pull back to Sierra Leone.
That is deep there, and that is something that need to be explored.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm. All right. You did say that you left 1 year before the start of the Civil War.
Mm,
All right. What do you remember of that? Now, okay, you are now in the UK, but
yeah.
of course, you left some people there. How old were you when you left, actually?
I was 5. Yeah, so really young. So it's a difficult one because I think culturally I still feel connected to Sierra Leone despite, I mean, I go back every year now, but it's usually just for Christmas. Um, and at the time, I was just in a completely different environment and not really understanding what was going on. It's only really now looking back that I was really aware of the situation that was happening back home. Like we stopped communicating so much, but I didn't really pay attention to it. Um, and we actually traveled back in 96. And I think that was for my grandma's birthday, and it was in a lull. Like, if anyone's familiar with the Civil War, it started out in the peripheries of Sierra Leone because of it joined in with everything that was happening with Liberia and stuff, and it took its time to get to Freetown, which is where most of my family was located. So for all intents and purposes, it was the impact wasn't seen, especially with me being here in UK. But now looking back, I remember things where I'm like, okay, now I understand what that was. So for example, there was a situation where I remember having a call with my grandma, and she had to come off the phone really quickly. And that was because rebels were at the door. And at the time, it didn't register. It was just, oh, okay. I don't think I really understood what that term meant at the time. But, after a while, it was looking back and starting to connect the dots between all these things I experienced as a child and didn't understand. Now I'm like, oh, that's what that was. So yeah, that was my experience of it.
The explanation of the Civil War is something that I would have liked to explore. But anyway, I don't think we might have to do that again because, of course, here the podcast is just it's just for us to be able to explore ourselves. But today, I think we have something like 30 minutes or so. And so I wanted to speak about your social entrepreneurship. Except, of
Mm.
course, you decide which one is more interesting for you. Then, of course, we'll come back again next time to talk about some other area. What would you prefer?
Yeah, I think the social entrepreneurship would be great because it's a project that it kind of, I guess it's the most current for me at the moment. It's my vehicle back to Sierra Leone.
All right, that's interesting. All right, so tell me, Andre, how did you get into social entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so I think, to be honest, I wasn't really familiar with the term at first. Obviously everyone knows the term entrepreneur, but socialpreneur, I was introduced to it at an event, and they were talking about the idea of social impact and entrepreneurism. So the idea is having a vehicle for change, which also generates income. And I just really like the idea of that because even before I traveled, I was very, I don't know, against the idea of just giving people money or something along those lines without necessarily, and then just disappearing, because I didn't see the sustainability in that. In Sierra Leone, we have a really, I'm not going to say bad, but there are a lot of NGOs, for example, who are doing great work, but without them, if they were to stop now, they would leave huge holes in people's lives. And I feel like I think that was a red flag for me. So basically, whenever I create anything or whether I partner with anyone, I have a few things that I put in place. The first is an out in 5 policy. And the idea with that is that whatever we start with the intention that in 5 years, we should be able to let go. And that means we would have had to train people to take it over.